Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Shiva Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Jaya Para 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 Jaya Jaya Guru Sai Go Subhanahu Spray Raja Between Master Grasha Shishima, the Summer Grace, Bhaktivedanta, Samara, Shilpapa, Ki Jai, Jam Shubhat, Pramam Spray Raja Jai, Stota Shishima, Bhakti Saranta says, Valido Samaraj, Gopal, Ki Jai, Anant Kodavashnavan, Ki Jai, the Thai Go. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 8, text number 10. Nunam Hyanya Sadhava Upashama Shila Kripana Suhridha Evam Vidhate Swatan Api Guru Taran Upekshante. Word for word. Nunam, indeed, he, certainly, Arya, those who are advanced in civilization, Sadhava, saintly persons, Upashama, Shila, even though completely in the renounced order of life, Kripana, Suhrida, the friends of the helpless, vidha arte. To execute such principles, swartan api, even the even their own personal interests, guru taran, very important, upekshanti, neglect. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Even though one is in the renounced order, one who is advanced certainly feels compassion for suffering living entities. One should certainly neglect his own personal interests, although they may be very important, to protect one who has surrendered. Purport. Maya is very strong. In the name of philanthropy, altruism, and communism, people are feeling compassion for suffering humanity throughout the world. Philanthropists and altruists do not realize that it is impossible to improve people's material conditions. Material conditions are already established by the superior administration according to one's karma. They cannot be changed. The only benefit we can render to suffering beings is to try to raise them to spiritual consciousness. Material comforts cannot be increased or decreased. It is therefore said in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.18, Tal labhyate dukkhavad anyata shukam. As far as material happiness is concerned, that comes without effort, just as tribulations come without effort. Material happiness and pain can be attained without endeavor. One should not bother for material activities. If one is at all sympathetic or able to do good to others, he should endeavor to raise people to Krishna consciousness. In this way, everyone advances spiritually by the grace of the Lord. For our instruction, Bharat Maharaj acted in such a way. We should be very careful not to be misled by so-called welfare activities conducted in bodily terms. One should not give up his interest in attaining the favor of the Lord at any cost. Generally, people do not know this, or they forget it. Consequently, they sacrifice their original interest, the attainment of Vishnu's favor, and engage in philanthropic activities for bodily comfort. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Even though one is in the renounced order, one who is advanced certainly feels compassion for suffering living entities. One should certainly neglect his own personal interests, although they may be very important, to protect one who has surrendered. So I always really liked this section of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's extremely instructive to us as sadhana bhaktas trying to practice devotional service to become perfect. We hear, I'm pretty sure when I would read this section, I always noted that this was actually the only purport where you get the clue that actually Bharat Maharaj, he purposefully fell down. The Prabhupada says here in a very small sentence, you miss it if you blink. For our instruction, Bharat Maharaj acted in this way. If you read Brihad Bhagavatam Rita, then you'll find there, it's also mentioned that Bharat Maharaj, he specifically fell down just to instruct us what not to do. It's also mentioned Yudhisthira Maharaj also lost the gambling match intentionally. So sometimes great souls, they act in such a way, or actually always great souls, they act in such a way to instruct us. But generally they set the example that we all want to follow. But in this case, we see that Bharat Raj, he's setting an example that we should not follow. For those of you who have been listening into Bhagavatam class, who are familiar with this chapter, then you'll see how Bharat Raj, he is gradually slipping from his spiritual stature by the influence of the material energy. So I've heard it described before, actually, that there's 4 mistakes that you see Bharat Raj exhibit, which are very important to hear and to contemplate because they're mistakes that we can easily fall into. So when you first, a couple of texts ago, you'll find that Bharat Raj, he, when he saw this deer in such a helpless situation, his heart was naturally overwhelmed with a sense of wanting to help this poor living entity. And of course, we know that he went and he got this deer and he was protecting it very nicely. But actually, it wasn't his duty to do so. No, he had accepted the renounced order of life. He'd given up his family life just like stool, like one walks away from it after passing, completely given up everything. So why should he feel such affection for such an insignificant creature when he'd already given up so much? His family, his friends, his kingdom, practically the whole world was under his rule. So why should he feel such duty to look after this insignificant living entity? So it's described that actually he fell victim to wanting to work according to his previous dharma as a king. As we know, kings, they by nature want to give protection. They want to give shelter. It's the way that their psychophysical nature is made up. They want to see everyone as protected, and they feel a great sense of satisfaction by being that person who can give that shelter, give that protection. So it's an interesting point that he actually wasn't working according to his dharma that he'd accepted as a renunciant. He should have just not even blinked an eye and just gone on with his meditation. But he fell victim to a subtle type of sense gratification of wanting to work according to his previous dharma. So this is the first mistake, and it's applicable to us because although we may only change our ashram once or twice, every 25 years, still it's applicable because most of us will go through a phase where we're a single ashram, brahmachari or brahmacharini, and then into a grihastha ashram. And if we're fortunate, into vanaprastha ashram. And of course, a very, very rare soul may go into sannyasa ashram. But it's important to contemplate and understand. Of course, I'm just speaking for my own purification because most have already gone through this phase and understand all this, but I'll mention it anyway, just so I can try to remember. For a brahmachari, there's a certain type of flavor that they get in their ashram. Same with as a grihastha, same with a vanaprastha, same with a sannyasi. But that flavor, it comes at a cost that you have to be willing to pay. And by paying that cost, you become purified. So as a brahmachari, it's very nice. You get the nice flavor of not having to pay any rent, not having to look after anyone except for your own self, not having to deal with the material energy. You don't have to, get a registration for your car. You don't have to pay for your food. You don't have to pay for practically anything. All you have to do is wake up, chant your rounds nicely, do your sadhana, do your service, and that's it. So you're completely looked after traditionally in the Guru's ashram, if you're fortunate. So everything is being provided for you by the Guru because you're serving the Guru selflessly. In theory, that's how it's supposed to work. So by doing that, then it's very nice because you get this nice flavor of actually not having to really deal with the material energy at all. A very, very simple and easy life. But the austerity is that there's no association with the opposite sex. But by that, um, then you can become purified. So of course, for basically 99% of men, then that will be and for a woman, it will be very difficult to live single like that. There are some rare cases, some rare persons who can do that. Generally, they have to be very Brahmanically inclined to be able to be motivated by themselves without the association of the opposite sex. So then most will go into Grihastha ashram where they can have the flavor that comes by the association of the opposite sex. But in order to experience that flavor, they have to be willing to accept the austerity, the sacrifice of having to maintain and look after not only themselves, but the other person that they're in relation to, and often their kids. And from that, their house, their home, their home, cat, dog, whatever else they may acquire. So it's austere, but by that accepting that responsibility, that austerity, they can also become purified if they use it in Christian service. So, but if one tries to work according to the Dharma of the different ashram and try to experience the flavor, like if a brahmachari tries to experience the flavor of the opposite sex in a subtle way, even, then he becomes contaminated. And if a grihasta tries to live a simple life and not look after his family and not care for his wife or for his kids, then he also becomes contaminated. So you have to work according to the Dharma, the ashram that you're in. And of course, we read the books, we hear from the saintly people, and we hear from this what's best for us at a particular phase of life and how to work in that phase so that we become purified rather than contaminated more by the material energy. So we take this example, the first mistake of Bharat Maharaj, that we should be very careful how to execute our Dharma properly, based on the guidance from the association of the devotees, the association of Bhagavatam and Prabhupada, and the association of the spiritual master. So we see that, unfortunately, Bharat Maharaj, he made that mistake of acting according to his previous Dharma. The second mistake that you read, you may have picked up on if you saw, is that he knowingly basically threw away his sadhana. He could see that this person, he's a person, but this deer was becoming an impediment towards his devotional service. He was trying to focus on his meditation, and this deer, you read as the chapter goes on more specifically, how the deer would come and prod him with its soft horns, wanting attention. And Bharat Maharaj was thinking, I'm so distracted, but anyway, this deer is so cute and it's got no one else except for me. So sometimes we may experience this in spiritual life, that something becomes very prominent in our consciousness and it's taking up so much time and energy and effort. And we begin to prioritize it more than our own personal sadhana, more than our association with the devotees, more than all the things that are beneficial for our Krishna consciousness, that are keeping us Krishna conscious. So I have to be very careful how to balance things properly, because it doesn't matter how long we've been around, anyone can gradually neglect their sadhana and disappear. We are by nature marginal potency, so it means we're on the fence. We can go either way. Even if we're very much leaning on the fence towards Krishna, if we slacken off, then it's just a matter of time before we are pulled. And Bharat Maharaj shows that he was on the level of bhava, very high level of Krishna consciousness, but still he acted in such a way that he was pulled over towards the material energy. So unfortunately, I've seen this in my even just short time practicing Krishna consciousness, that one of my good friends who actually live with in New Zealand, recently his wife, during the COVID pandemic, she stopped her sadhana, got into so many controversies, conspiracies and things. And she started to disagree with devotees, disagree with her spiritual master, disagree with her husband. And gradually, she stopped reading. Her rounds were splayed out all over the day. She started getting up late. And she left her husband, dropped her service. She was cooking basically, I think it was every Wednesday at our outreach center, the Bhakti Lounge, for it was longer than 10 years. She'd been practicing for 20 years. She used to be a very amazing book distributor, brought so many devotees to Krishna consciousness. And of course, Krishna always remembers this. Krishna always sees her as an amazing devotee. And she is an amazing devotee, but temporarily she's now disappeared. So it's very sad to see, and it's simply because something else became prominent in her consciousness other than her own sadhana, and very easily can just drop the ball. So unfortunately, it was um, not just her, but many people during the COVID pandemic. And there's always something, material energy will always bring up something to um, get fixated on as if it's something very important. So we always have to try to remember, as His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj likes to say, that we should give our japa the pride of place in our life, that we make sure our day is arranged in such a way that we have the best possible time for our chanting. Again, preaching to myself, because while you're in the ashram, it's very easy. You can just get up every morning, same time, sit in the same place, chant all your rounds in one go. But when you change ashram, then it may be that you're giving your japa the pride of place means that you have to split. Like Prabhupada, even he gave the example that he would chant, or he gave the suggestion that you can chant 4 rounds before each meal. So I believe he also had, perhaps someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he'd also mentioned that he'd done this in a period of his life where he would chant four rounds before his breakfast, 4 rounds before his lunch, 4 rounds before his dinner, and 4 rounds in the evening. So it may just be due to circumstances we can't chant all of our rounds in one go in the morning, but still we should try to organize our life so that it's not that we're just rushing them last minute before we have to go to sleep, or 2 minutes to midnight. So this was the second mistake that Maharaj Bharat made, that he didn't he just willingly knew that, okay, this thing is getting in the way, but anyway, I what can I do? I'm already attached. He didn't make any effort to try to reorganize, re-engineer his life for his sadhana. And the third mistake is that he had no association. There was no one there to tell him, Prabhu, I think you're getting a little bit carried away. So we should always appreciate the association of the devotees, because without them, not only is it very difficult to have motivation to practice Krishna consciousness, but it's also very difficult to actually see where we're going wrong and where we're going right. Being in the association of devotees is sometimes very humbling, but that's good, because we want to become humble if we're not really humble. It's just the problem is that, often it's said we want to be humble, but we don't want to be humbled. So if we feel humbled, it's good, because we realize, wow, I've got so much more to go to become a devotee, and that's really nice. I've got so much more I need to do. Just like sometimes, go to the morning program and the weekends in Wellington. Then there's a morning program for all the devotees at the Bhakti Lounge. So the grihastas, the single ladies, single men, everyone comes if they can. And sometimes, you don't want to go. And sometimes you get there and you don't want to be there. And you realize, wow, all these other devotees are so enthusiastic. They're dancing and they're chanting. Why don't I feel like that? What am I doing wrong in my life that I don't? So the association of devotees is so important. Keeps us on track, keeps us motivated, and keeps us corrected as well, because we can't really misbehave in the association of serious devotees, because we'll know that they know that we're not doing the right thing. So Bharat Maharaj, if he was in the association, imagine if he was here right now in the temple room, if there's a couple of devotees here, and of course there's the Parampara and there's Prabhupada, but he wouldn't feel very comfortable if he was chanting his japa and, the deer was pushing him with his horns. He would probably, although he may feel like it, he may feel like giving the deer a lot of attention, in the association of the devotees, he would probably neglect, because he would know actually this is the right thing to do. So the devotees, they protect us, help us to move in a way which is actually dharma. So the last mistake that Bharat Maharaj made was that he didn't get any guidance from the ashram leader at the particular ashram where he was staying. So for us, then obviously, whatever decision we make in life, we should always try our best to get the advice from our ashram leader or our spiritual master or our mentor, or someone who is in good standing in Krishna consciousness that we can trust, that we can reveal our mind to, and we feel as though we can get an opinion which is not biased in any other way except for that they want the best thing for Krishna's pleasure and for our spiritual life. So if he had asked, do you think this is a good idea, me maintaining this deer? It would have been, all of these problems could have been resolved. He would not have had to have taken birth again, and he would not have had to have gone through uh, his life as Jadabharat, where basically he had to spend his whole life just trying to correct the mistakes that he'd made. Actually, 2 lives, same thing he did as a deer. He went back to the same place, the same ashram, and tried to practice his meditation again. He took the form of Jadabharat, where he had to pretend as though he was deaf, dumb, just to avoid all contamination of bad association. So we don't want to have to come back to this material world. Some may want to come back to preach, but as we know, Prabhupada recommended that we desire to go back home, back to Godhead. And if we have that desire and we become purified, then we may, have the realization that being back home, back to Godhead means devotional service. So what does it matter in the material world or the spiritual world? But we can't artificially think like that. So we should desire to go back to the spiritual world. And if that desire to come here and continue to serve in the material world, if that happens, then that's nice. But we should just desire to become purified, become free from material energy, go back to the spiritual world. So we just have to be a little bit careful. It's actually very simple, the whole process, as we've heard many times before. Tadvini panipatina, pariprasthena seva upadikshanti, teganam gyaninas tattvadarshana. And we just approach the spiritual master and we ask them, how may I serve you? And then we do that service, whatever it is that they ask. The next verse, I forget the Sanskrit. But Krishna, he explains that if you do this, then you'll see everywhere that all living beings are but part of me, or in other words, that they're mine. So we want to have that realization that actually everyone is Krishna's devotee, including me. So I should try to do something for Krishna. And I should try to arrange my life in such a way that I can be as Krishna conscious as possible. I should be in the association of the devotees. I should hear from the spiritual master. I should prioritize my spiritual practice. And I should try to understand what my position is according to my ashram, what I need to do to become purified. That way we can make progress. Gradually over the years, we'll see how we're becoming more purified and we're making advancement back towards the spiritual world. And what the amazing thing is that we may not see it in ourselves so much, but we'll see it in the devotees that we stick it out with. That's the benefit of being in one place over a long period of time, with other devotees who stay in the same place over a long period of time. Of course, it's all relative what long means. For me, it's quite. I spent 8 years in one ashram with the brahmacharis, and I could see the devotees that I started with at the beginning of that 8 years, and then after 8 years, I could see they were like different people. All of because every single living entity, other than Krishna, has their imperfections. And as we become more conscious of Krishna, we become more conscious of those imperfections. And we see the devotees around us, how they excel in areas that we don't. Um, we may not be so good in our personal dealings, but then there's others who have good personal dealings, and we may be uh, lacking in our determination, whereas there's others that are determined, and we may be lacking in uh, so many areas we lack, actually. But we see the other devotees around us, and we become inspired by them to develop their qualities, serve them, develop their qualities. So you put a whole lot of people together like that, who are all struggling sadhana bhaktas. But if they're just determined and they push on, then we see how they become great persons. And because we're in their association, we can also become a great person, and we can inspire other people to become great persons, great devotees of Krishna. So I want to try to learn from Bharat Raj what not to do, so that we don't have to make these mistakes. So I'll stop there. Do we ask for questions online, or if there's any questions, then otherwise we'll stop. Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Taigo permanently. Thank you.